So let's do a deep dive into IAM roles and policies. This policy are attached to my IAM role, my first EC2 role. And so there are different components into policies. As you can see, there is attached policy that can be managed, or you can create your own. So if we go to the policy tab, we can see that all these policies are AWS managed. That means that will get updated over time, but you can also create your own policy. And when you create your own policy, you can choose a service, actions, resources, and request conditions. You can also import managed policies and so on. So it is very much possible for your infrastructure and your organization to create your own set of policies. Now, there is also another subtlety you can do, is that when you go to your EC2 role, you can add an inline policy. Inline policy are basically policies that are going to be added inline, so that means on top of whatever you've already chosen. And it turns out that these policies are not possible to be added to other roles, okay? So this is like basically saying this policy is just for that role. Overall, I don't really recommend using inline policies. It's always better to manage policies globally just to get a better management view. So now, how do we create these policies and how do we analyze them? Well, let's look at the Amazon S3 read-only access. It turns out that it gives you a policy summary, which is a nice little table, or you can get a JSON document. So if you look at the policy summary, it says that on S3, you get full read and limited lists. Okay, let's have a look at the JSON. And it looks like, yes, we're allowed to perform actions, which is get something or list something on resource star. And basically that says that you are able for any Amazon S3 resource to perform API calls that start with the name get something or list something. So how does that work? Well, let's type AWS S3 list bucket API. And now we get basically a list bucket API right here. And so if we look at it, the name of the API is called list bucket. And so this is why we have list star. But there's a bunch of list operations you can do on AWS, obviously. Same for get. We can do get object or get bucket, and so on. Now, if we look at the Amazon S3 full access instead, well, the JSON document this time allows S3 star. So that means any API call on S3 is allowed. And resource star means anything you want. So the idea is that you are able through this JSON document to specify what you want. But how do we know exactly how to make this JSON document? Well, let's give it a go and create our own policy. So policy I'll create, and I'll say, this is a policy that we will just practice on. So we need to choose a service, and we can get a visual editor or a JSON editor. This is basically when you want to type it all out or copy and paste something from the web, and this is where you want to just click and choose whatever happens. So let's choose a service. For example, we'll choose Amazon S3 because we've been working with it. And then here it gives me all the actions that are allowed in S3. So I can say all S3 actions, which is S3 star, we've seen this. Or we can say list, read, write, or permission management. And if we drill down in something, we can see that within each read, we, for example, get all the different operations one can be allowed. So maybe we only want to allow get objects, and that's it. So I just knocked out this one. But if I wanted to click on read, then it will select all 31 possible API calls from me. Same for list, etc., etc. So for this, let's just allow get objects. That sounds right. Okay, now we can choose resources. And so when we scroll down, we click on resources and it says, okay, what are you allowed to read? You're allowed to read either a specific bucket or all resources. All resources is the star we've seen from before, but we can also be specific and add ARN. So to add an ARN, we can look at the ARN we have for our buckets, and we can basically say, okay, the bucket name is the bucket of Stefan, and we can take the any here. That would basically change the bucket name to star, so we'll just leave it to the bucket of Stefan. And the object name, we can also click on here saying any star and just added a / star right here. We'll click on add, and here I've basically created a policy just for this. Then you can specify conditions. They're optional and they're basically allow you to drill down into the policies. For now, we won't need them. Let's add additional permissions if you wanted to, but we actually don't need it, so we'll remove it. And we'll review the policy. Now it turns out I give read access on this resource for these conditions, so I'll just call it my test S3 manage custom policy. And we'll click on create policy. And now we can click on this policy itself, and we can even look at the JSON. And so the JSON was generated using the visual editor. And we can see that we allow S3 get objects on this resource. So this visual editor is actually quite nice. There's another one you may need to be aware of. It's called AWS Policy Generator, and just Google it and you get the first link. And this is basically something just like that. You can create a policy type. So for us, this was an IAM policy, and we can say, okay, we want to allow on the service S3 the action, and here we get all the actions we want. So get objects is what we had. On the ARN, I'll just leave star for now to make it simple. We can click on add statements and then generate policy, and this gives us a JSON of what we need. So these two tools are very similar. They're both created by AWS. So now I think Amazon wants you to most likely use the visual editor we've had in the IAM console, but just so you know, there is also this policy generator tool right here. So from this, you're able to create your policies. The advantage of creating policies here is that you can see who is using it and the version, so you can basically add versions of that policy to make sure that you can always roll back to a previous version if it was 2 permissions, or you get to track as well all the versions you've ever created. Coming back to our roles, we can go and look at our first role, and I'll just close this, click on our first role, and we can attach our policy. And the one we just created, I think, was called test something, my test custom S3 policy, and this type is customer manage, and we can attach it. So here we go. Now our S3 EC2 role only has these 3 things. And so because I managed this one, I'm actually able to probably make it more specific to my EC2 instance, and it's probably going to be better security. So that's it to basically create policies. In the next lecture, I'll just show you how to test them.